Regarding the hyperscalers, we should have a big week next week. Apple the bears have owned this story in my opinion. They will show the skeptics a little lacking in China. They really do, in general, exceed numbers. Apple seems to be one that this type of signals the bottom we would expect to see for the year. Let us go to there, Dan. Spend a little extra time on Apple. Year to date the stock is down roughly 10%. Let's start here. And before Dan can answer, please, I will explain why I decided to run the common sense style on most major apertures, and make it above X a little, which is rather odd for that name in this context. Tell us about the issues, particularly in relation to phone sales in China. Look, and let's work through some figures too. Look, in terms of what we have seen with the headlines, China has been soft in the past few quarters. Regarding the AI release, Apple Intelligence, however, we think that's actually not going to be unveiled until April. ByteDance, Tencent, Baidu most likely will be the partner. Is it a little softer? In China it is 2 to 3% softer. So just surround it with numbers. Street had projected 225 million units for the year. Right now we count roughly 230 million, 5 million forward. The ideal count was 240 million. Perhaps such is off the menu. Paul. Also, this seems to be as excessive sell-off as I have observed on Apple over several years. Pathos sexu. Relevant. Talk to us about Palantir, Dan. When one considers these large tech stocks, perhaps few people are familiar with that moniker, and I know you people have been quite outstanding, but you have been hostile on this name. The stock's rise over a trailing 12 months is 370%. Give us your call on Palantir. I think it will be the next Salesforce or Oracle. Regarding the AI revolution, this is most likely the best pure-play software available on the market. Like Nvidia on chips, this is how I see Palantir's software side. And that is why, look, many have detested this. They dislike this as a senior citizen living in Florida at 80, right? They loathe this as a teen starting the year 12-13. Hence, and I think this could finally be a stock. That finally, when you consider who might be the next Oracle salesperson? I mean, this is pounds here. Dan, go down the Apple income statement. Alright, I have single-digit income growth and the gloom group hangs on it considering the multiple, 2030 whatever the multiple is. The magic occurs though down the income statement to produce cash. Is any component of that system given Paul's inquiry on China or honestly additional 6 concerns? Like you know, this is what Silo Season 3 is going to be like. But with any Apple concern, is the cash generating machine malfunctioning? During the next 2 to 3 years free cash flow will rise by 12 to 15%. What then is the stopping mechanism? Towards the end of the month what happens? It's 422 p.m. when we go, OMG, China was light. But cash flow's up how much then? I believe cash flow has probably beats 3 to 5%, and free cash flow for the year will be up 12 to 15%, which is why I feel this represents the bottom. Apple seems to me to be a stock. Okay. Therefore, good morning Mr. Buffet. Mr. Buffet, like listening while Dan Ives is on. Are you advising Berkshire's Warren Buffett on additional Apple purchases? Oh, given what I see, I believe it to be a table bounder. You say Apple is light in the quarter, still they will reveal an Apple Intelligent partner in a few months, and then, when they access artificial intelligence, you will eventually have 25% of the world's population using Apple products. Integration? At 10.1%. My perspective is so simple, many have missed Apple's last $2.5 trillion in markup. This is a new book, you don't sell Apple, but your knowledge or expectation that SoftBank will retain its current or mistaken arm? Will connect that back continues to be the mantra here. They focus on the bears coming out, own the narrative, scare white knuckles, then Cook and Cupertino come through, and you're like, let's just consider pharma investment and drug development when you consider some of the things artificial intelligence will be able to enable. Drugs develop over 10 to 20 years, starting at the base level, 95% of those efforts fail. We conduct animal lab tests still. Approvals wait a long period. Not just in terms of creating amazing treatments faster and sooner, but also in terms of developing drugs we cannot even do today, i.e. cancer drugs especially on genome sequence. AI can shorten all those development timeframes. Therefore I believe there will be enormous, massive return in many disruptive spheres. Among the fields I most find fascinating is medicine, and usually publish it elsewhere. But the field most interests me is medicine. Hundreds of times, the history of treatment is disruptive. I listen very hard to contemporary AI specificity. Tony, looking at your science and technology fund's percentage ownership holdings, not surprising Nvidia clearly is your biggest holding. At least as the figures I now have, which might be somewhat outdated. You know, I do find Apple underweight, at least in terms of a mirror of its market capitalization compared to some of the others. Why is this so? Indeed, I believe over time that, given my great optimism for the development of this artificial intelligence infrastructure, you essentially have to create the infrastructure before developing the apps on it. You know, Apple still runs a fantastic business. You know, I doubt you could count them out. In any sense, their ecology remains rather robust. I like both firms long term, but as you know, my framework is always like shifting, positions. Nvidia continues to be the platform that everyone kind of is building on. We are in the early stages of AI infrastructure build-out, and you look at their new products that are simply enhancing the performance by leaps and bounds, and so on. That's what excites me, and because Nvidia is a full-stack company, I believe the Stargate announcement will show a lot of infrastructure still being built on Nvidia. Nvidia called me to say that they're doing a watch for you, Nordica Sync, and I wrote, to me the multi-year here excites me for this. Alright Lauren, you're staring at some movers. Micron we mentioned already today. What is going on? I am therefore repetitious, not sure, by Micron was Dr. Barton's advice. Perhaps you would like to purchase it at its decline. At 104 it's down nearly 5%. So Nvidia, you can see Broadcom, all the chip manufacturers are much lower. Here's the justification. Out of South Korea, SK Hynix, a client of Nvidia, a partner, declared record profits for the last quarter. Nevertheless, their outlook was poor and they particularly mentioned a slowdown in smartphone sales, which has chilled that industry. Perfect. And a warning from South Korean chipmaker Hynix sending its customer Nvidia, as well as many other US chipmakers, they are lower on the day. As you can see, Nvidia off only slightly. Broadcom dropped more than 1%. Micron down 4%. Although SK Hynix reported a record profit for the fourth quarter, these actions follow from warnings of more rapid demand decreases in commodity memory chips, using SK Hynix and such. I know you have a chart looking at Nvidia. You observe its relationship with silver. KG, hit me with it real quick, since we will be actively monitoring the chips today. Indeed, and for the next many days and weeks here, we should be closely observing them. Still, over the past year there has been a quite close correlation. This is a 6-month chart, but over the past year of silver and chips in general, especially considering Nvidia. This is kind of the growth narrative. Clearly, these GPUs make use of silver really extensively. Among all the headlines we have seen, with possibly $500 billion from the Stargate deal, along with some conjecture, there were some news stories that Saudi Arabia might be investing up to $600 billion here in the United States. This truly intrigues me here. On top of that, that's a growth story that calls for a lot of materials and infrastructure. But what you kind of notice, none of the associated commodities are really grabbing a bit off of any of this news. Actually, you are observing a quite good divergence. I will thus be simply observing this correlation here to see whether it returns in influence in the line here, and is it going to be silver type of catching up to what Nvidia has done over the past few trading sessions? Alternatively, do we observe an Nvidia breakdown? Typically year and a half from now, what we have seen in the past or previous year is silver leads the chips and leads Nvidia. Right now that might not be the situation, perhaps there's a disconnection here. But lately I have been observing a lot of this, and last year it was rather almost perfect. Right now among the more notable ones I have witnessed over years here is that great discrepancy. Alright, quite fascinating. Alright, therefore maybe Nvidia needs to close that margin, or we see a major rally in silver, but I kind of feel like we know it's driving the bus generally. Thus, we will observe possibly. Close association.